Welcome to Enlightened Evolution,
I'm Cay.
and I'm Christina.
We're here to discuss the ebb and flow of our soul's healing and transformation through self-reflection, choosing intentionally, honoring thyself, and following your inner guide.
Thank you for joining this safe space with us. Welcome, everyone, to Enlightened Evolution. We are talking about how our mothers shaped who we are today, but let's start with a pulse check. How are you doing, Kay?
I'm doing wonderful. Much better than a couple days ago. How are you?
Good. I feel the same. I feel so much better today. My energy is better. I feel like there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes. Oh, I don't. My
I
menstrual cycle just wipes me right out of life. But yes, I worked out today and put mascara on and some boots, and I had a great day.
That's awesome. I also did yoga this morning and then skated at the park, and it felt so good
Oh,
to be in
nice.
sunshine.
That's so funny because for a moment in my mind, I'm like, "Really? You went ice skating today? But you're in Georgia and I'm over here in
I went
Michigan."
rollerblading.
Yeah, rollerblading. I know. And yeah, after I said that, I'm like or thought that, I was like, "No, she was not ice skating anywhere." That's awesome. That's so fun. That's so much fun.
Yes, I'm glad we are both feeling mentally better and physically.
Yeah, it just goes in waves, girl. I don't think it's ever you can't really maintain just
Can't be
feeling great all the
100% all the
time,
time.
and yeah, no, you can't. You cannot.
Not
So
realistic.
So I am great today, so I will be thankful for it while it's here.
Yes. All right. So, would you like to start us off talking about our mothers, our favorite
I
topic?
Yeah, I know. I do. I think that starting this conversation today because it's a little sensitive for both of us and we are so aware of how they've shaped us. I just want to I'm going to just remember that they did the best they could and we have compassion for them and this all comes from a place of love and just being aware and accepting them and they didn't get to choose how they were raised and they didn't really they may have had a choice per se in how they raised us, but I do think that they did the best that they could at that time. So,
Yes. And we are both firstborns in our family.
yes,
So, we were
very
both
true.
our mother's first try at parenting.
Yeah, true, very true. And I think whether your mother was just so loving and nurturing and doted over you, or she emotionally neglected or invalidated you, some mothers tried to be their friend, people's friends more and overly permissive and or more inclined to be overly protective. We're just here to cover all those things today. And hopefully you can better understand how your mother shaped you and just start to heal from that and just be aware of your patterns and how you are in relationships with your friendships or how you are as a mom. I don't know about you. I think we did talk a little bit about our mothers, but mine was very anxious and fear driven. She was very nurturing, loving. My mom didn't yell a lot, but she was anxious a lot and fear a lot. And I think that she was afraid to see us get hurt if we failed. So it held me back from a lot of things. And so there was always this sense like now in my adult life, I didn't even go to school, college until I was 27 years old. I remember getting out of high school and she I remember first trying to go to college when I first got out of high school and going to orientation and trying to figure out, the financial aid. And it just seemed like such a burden, stressful situation for her. And I feel like it held me back. Like I couldn't do it. Like it was too hard. Like everything just had to feel so hard. And so there was that aspect of her anxiety, which w- was given to me. And then also just rushing to go nowhere constantly like like is it really the end of the world if you're a couple minutes late to somewhere, so now I just find myself like if I'm at work like I'm rushing, like I'm walking fast for no reason and I'm trying to hit these imaginary deadlines, like, constantly. And so I just stop and take a deep breath, and there's absolutely nothing to be anxious about today. And I know that came from my mom. Just the way that she was my whole life. Was your mom anxious like that, or was it just
She was, and I like to back up to what you said, like, about giving them grace. As a child, a teenager, a young adult, I learned more about my mother's childhood as I aged, so
Mhm.
not that it's kinda like a catch-22 because it's not that what happened to you excuses what you do to other people, but now I can see how she was the person she was.
Yeah.
My mother like, my grandmother tried to murder my mom, so, like, she has
Oh,
hella trauma.
yeah.
Yeah, so and her mother was very unprepared and would leave them without food and clothes and would take them to gang members' houses and would drive them across the country with nothing packed for them. My grandmother was very, mentally unstable, and so my mom was a firstborn as well, and she grew up as a young child having to take care of her young sister, having to find food for them. So that caused her to be, like, very overly prepared and very anxious about, like, preparing for everything, which then, of course, instilled that in me as well, which I have, like I listed out things of my mother that shaped who I am, and I have, like, a good and a bad column, and things that are duplicated in both.
Yeah.
So there's some good and some bad. Does it help? We talked about perfectionism before, and my mom has
Yeah.
definitely made me a perfectionist, and there can be a lot of good things about it and a lot of bad things about it. I don't think I'd be where I am in my career without having that kind of mindset of being a perfectionist and having to be the best and always doing my best and having this, like, preoccupation with failure. But at the same time, I know I've mentioned before, it can make relationships difficult,
Mhm.
and it makes I think the biggest thing for me, actually, my husband and I had I don't even know if I'd call it an argument. We had a conversation not too long ago where there's been a theme throughout my life where I'd never want someone to tell me I'm acting like my mom.
Mm, yeah.
and and not that she's just an evil, horrible person, because she's not, but I never like, she was very verbally abusive to everyone in our family and to my dad, and she was very, like she would always cut him down and yell at him and go beyond nagging, really. It was, constant screaming every day. And I was like, I never want to do that in a relationship. I never want to nag my partner. I never want to constantly tell them what they're doing wrong. So I really try to be mindful in my relationship of giving my partner positive feedback. And of course, not everything is going to be great all the time. There's going to be times when we have to talk about, hey, you did this and I didn't like it. So we had one of those conversations of, hey, you did this and I didn't like it. And I said it in a very abrupt way because I'm still working on my delivery.
Yeah.
And so he let me know that the way I said it did not feel good to him, and that it kind of made the other positive things I had said to him kinda not feel as important, I guess.
Like, diminished.
Yeah, like, diminished.
Mhm.
And it, like, set me aback, and I was like, "But I'm trying so hard to not be the person that raised me." And, like, in my mind, I'm like, "Okay, my mom would have handled this situation by screaming at my dad and publicly berating him and all of these horrible things." And I was like, "I'm having a calm conversation with my partner. I told him what I didn't like, but I could have said it in a gentler way." And I think it's just that mindset of like, I think I'm doing a really good job,
Mhm.
but to other people who haven't grown up in an environment where there's constant screaming and all of this, they may feel like, and they could have grown up in an environment where nobody ever brought up any issues, where it was all just swept under the rug and we didn't talk about things that made us uncomfortable.
Yeah, that was more so mine. Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you feel like, because you mentioned that I'm doing so much better because I didn't make these mistakes like my mom did with berating him, screaming at him, and I find myself doing that too when I do things, and with more so right now for me, it's I compare myself to my mother through my own mothering. So, what I really wanna do is detach myself from that constant thought of, "Well, I'm doing better than my mom," and it's so hard, I think, for us to do that because w obviously, her impact on us is so ingrained in us. So we feel like if we're doing something different than her that's better, we feel like we're succeeding at something, and I wish that I could not over identify myself with her so much when I'm doing things because it holds on to the anger I have towards her still and the frustration with her, and it doesn't allow our relationship to just get to a place where I really wish I could just enjoy my mother more or call her and say, "Hey, let's go to lunch," and it's not like that. I saw that you were, like, with your mom the other day, and you guys, she came and saw you, and you guys went out. I think that's so great. I just every time I go, I don't know, it just feels like it just doesn't feel good, and so I think that maybe that's, like, my goal this year is to be able to get it within a good place within myself to, like, forgive her, to be able to go out with her again and do those things. So it's hard to get back to that place, though.
It is, and it took a lot of to get where I am with my mom today. One, it took her recognizing that I have boundaries and that I mean it when I have boundaries,
Mhm.
and that took us not speaking for 2 years. And now that we are, I think she sees a level of seriousness of, "I'm not gonna stand for certain things." So she really has been on good behavior, but it also has been me having these introspective conversations, thoughts, and seeing how she became who she was, and seeing, and I agree with you of, like, not wanting to keep that comparison all the time, and the only thing I do keep is the perspective of, like, I am trying to do the best I can to be a good human being, to be a good partner, to be a good friend, and I still mess up because of what was ingrained in me and
Oh,
how I
yeah.
was raised. And I see that in her, and I'm able to give her grace now
Mhm.
through that. I think it's funny, I don't know, since I've been on my healing journey, I've had these, talks with my higher self, and when I struggle with seeing someone's perspective and when I'm really, like, upset with someone, I can't understand how they could do something to me, very quickly, I get redirected by seeing my own same flaws.
Yes. Yeah, oh, yes. Yeah, especially being a mother. I have countless flaws that my son could start naming them if he came in the room. I'm sure that he would love to join this conversation. None none of us are perfect mothers at all. I I don't think, well, your mother screamed all the time and my mom didn't, so is your mom worse than my mom? But my mom didn't. Everything was pushed under the rug and things kind of were shameful. Hey, you need to be on, you have you're 13, 14, you have a boyfriend, we're going to get you on birth control. That was the only conversation. So it was like a lot of things were built around shame. And
Mm.
I needed, like, the conversations I'll have with my daughter. She's 10, so this would be gradually as she got older and started to have more serious romantic relationships, but I wish that I would have been taught more to value myself more. How is the mental, emotional spiritual aspect of your emotional, your romantic relationship affecting you. Is this person good for you? Do they genuinely love you and care about your well-being? Do they nurture you? And I didn't get that from my mother. I wasn't taught how to be loved by a man. And my dad did love us, and he was there, and he wasn't, we're going to talk about dads in a little bit, but he wasn't, I didn't watch my mom get abused. And so I find myself asking myself, the impact that my mother had on me, how did I end up in these relationships that I ended up in when she wasn't in these types of relationships and I didn't witness these things? And so I think it was the more kind of shame driven, the avoidant, invalidating, the emotionally vacant, where I was just set off on my own. I had to find my own direction. I had to learn the hard way because I wasn't taught. I remember being when I was young, being very upset about things, and it was like everything's going to be okay. There's nothing to cry about. Shopping or getting ice cream was like something that would cover up the emotional discord. As growing into an adult, I find myself getting in relationships with people that are avoidant, emotionally not on that deep of a level, because I didn't have that emotional closeness or anybody trying to ever really dive into me. She never really tried to dive into me. It was more of, "Oh, my child's upset, let me do something so we can gear her just not
More
to
like
be upset."
pacifying you.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to put it, yeah, for sure. Yeah, it was always de-escalation of my emotions to distract me with something else.
Have you ever read the book? I don't want to get the title wrong. It is one of my favorite books. I gifted it to someone recently. Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. It's by
No.
Lindsay Gibson. So this book was amazing. I listened to it on audiobook.
Mhm.
The subtitle is How to Heal from Distant, Rejecting, or Self-Involved Parents. And it goes through very different types of emotionally immature parents. And I loved it because there was no emotional maturity in my household. People reacted based on their instant feeling, whatever it was.
Mhm.
And if we ever had big feelings, if I got upset about something, it was always stop crying. It was never, why are you crying? Or what are you feeling right now? Let's explore your emotions. It's, you're really annoying me right now.
Yeah. Basically,
I
yeah,
need you to stop.
that's the basic message I got too. I just think I got it more in a subtle, gentle way. Yours was more like, and mine was like, "Yeah, let's just avoid this." It's
But
that's
do you remember having any like talks about feelings and emotions and how to express them?
I remember, and this was more so when I got into junior high school, I would have conflicts with girls at school, and it was never about how I felt about the situation. It was more so just, "Well, you can't act that way. You can't think like that. That's not very nice." Like, and granted, I probably was angry with whatever girl I was upset with that day, but it was always invalidating my feelings. It's wrong for me to feel that way. And so I would become more frustrated and more angry, and it was more of not a punishment, but more like a lecture about my feelings. That's how that felt.
Yeah, definitely. I do remember my mom supporting my feelings sometimes when it had to do with somebody outside of the family unit. So like I had a teacher that was giving me a bad grade and I felt like they were wrongfully giving me the bad grade. So she went
Mhm.
up to the school and, talked to them and had my back on that. But in the household, if I ever said like, "Hey, you're hurting my feelings," it was I always got called Cinderella a lot, like, "Oh, you're so, you know, you're so poor. You have to clean the house and do all these chores and woe is you, and so many people have it worse than you."
Mhm.
And all I really wanted in the moment was to, like, recognize that I'm having a feeling and talk through it, but I as a child, you don't know those things.
Yeah.
There was definitely I feel like because there was no emotional intelligence in the household, it caused me to have a lot of somatic suppression of feelings. Like, I learned at a young age just to suppress those feelings, and what we know now, or I'm sure people knew this years ago, what I know now after learning is when you don't move through your feelings, you suppress them in your body and you store them, and they are going to manifest. And as a child, they manifested in I had stress eczema. My fingerprint fell off my finger. Like, my hands were peeling because of stress that, like, was being
Yeah.
stored in my body, and, like, I lost my fingerprint at one point.
Oh my god.
Like, my whole finger was smooth. It was so weird. My body was doing these horribly weird things, and as an adult, it's manifested in different ways of, like, sciatic pain and all these different things, and only recently have I started to move those emotions through my body and deal with that suppression.
Yeah, somatic healing, somatic workouts, they say that you store your emotions in your hips and you'll go through these you'll have this emotional release and you'll start crying. I've recently started researching on like Pinterest how to do some of these because my I think it's your psoas or
So
PSOS.
as
Psoas, yeah. It's been pain and I've been in pain for 2 years. And I remember when I injured it and it's not gone away. And I know that these somatic workouts will heal me, and I am so terrified to feel the release of all these emotions, so I've been avoiding doing that. So maybe that's something that I will start to do. But I know that these workouts are beneficial to a lot of people.
Yeah, I did a 40-day program through the Workout Witch. She's on, Instagram, and I bought her 40-day program, and I didn't have I was really expecting a huge release like they talk
Mhm.
about where you just kind of ball, and maybe it's because I do need to do it more, but I did have a wonderful moment where I was in a position and I finally just had this, like, realization with my higher self that I was holding onto my pain for so long because I wanted it to be validated.
Ooh, I
And
love that.
holding it physically in my body was my body's way of saying, this happened, it's real, it happened, you experienced it, it was
Mhm.
painful." And I had this inner dialogue with my body and said, "Yes, it was, and we don't have to hold it anymore. You you and I know that it was real, and guess what? We already went through that pain, and we don't have to keep holding it." And in that moment, my pain just released from my body, and it was amazing.
Has your mom apologized to you?
So, somewhat. We had a really interesting conversation. It's been months back, like probably close to 8 months back, where she my brother had said to her that it was her fault that I got assaulted by my biological father. And she's like, "Do you think that?" And I was like, "Oh my god, absolutely not. It's no one but his fault. That's the
Mhm.
only person that is responsible for that." But because things were so bad at home, I always wanted to go and be with my bio dad because it felt like a safe escape. And I think that's where my brother got that from. And in that conversation, like, I told her, I was like, You did everything in your power you could. The system is broken. You went to the court system. You gave them as much evidence as you could. They still let me have visitation with him. Like, none of this you could have avoided. And so in that conversation, like, she again, like, apologized for things that had happened as far as that extent, which is not hers to apologize for.
Right.
As far as things that have, like, her actual actions throughout my childhood, no, there hasn't been any explicit apology.
Yeah. My mom's apologized. My mom has apologized to me, and I do really appreciate her apology. I know that she struggles internally, and I think that she is now still impulsive with how she reacts to me and some things. Like, I'll just be telling her something. I don't know. I was telling her something the other day and we haven't really spoken since. But I do see her all the time because she lives close and she does help me with my kids. So I see her. But we were just having this conversation about something that my daughter did or said. And I wasn't going to tell her dad. And she's like, well, I'm not going to, she's like, well, I'm not going to lie to him. I'm like, I'm not asking you to lie to him. There's nothing that needs to be, said. It's certainly not your position to tell him anything.
Mhm.
And so we got in a disagreement about that, but she instantly jumps to conclusions about what she thinks my approach is to things. And I think that's very frustrating to me. So it's just a cycle. I think that I just have to accept that the connection I have with her and what she can give me emotionally is what it's going to be. And maybe I could try a little bit harder to have a heart to heart with her, but I just it's like the constant disappointment of just not being seen and heard, which I that's how I felt in childhood. It was just not being seen and heard.
Have you had explicit conversations with her where you've expressed your needs to her?
I try to, but it's really hard for me to be vulnerable with my mother because of the constant invalidation throughout my life. So I think it's just the fear of not getting my needs met, which, carries on to my romantic relationships too. Not
Yeah.
wanting to express myself or having this harder exterior to not get my need, concerned with, well, are they going to hear me? Are they going to validate me? Am I going to get my needs met? And I'm very, like when I was younger in my 20s trying to navigate through romantic relationships, that I was very unconscious. But now, as I am in tune with my higher self and very aware of my patterns and my behaviors, my next romantic relationship, I will definitely be much more mindful. Oh, yeah, maybe we'll try again.
Yeah.
Because I do see her quite a bit. I do see her quite a bit. I think that I don't think it would ever get to the point where it would be, well, I just will completely stop talking to my mom.
Mhm.
But I do understand why people do. And I'm supportive of people just because that's your family. People say, well, that's my mom. I can't. Why? She's completely, she's bad for your mental health. You don't need to hear her berate you every day and still tell you that you're wrong or that you're not doing good enough. You don't have anything to prove to your parents anymore now that you're an adult.
No, that's very true. And it's hard for some people to grasp. I feel like, again, it's all about perspective. For me, I know I've mentioned this before. It was easy for people to see me not speak to my bio dad because he did something so heinous. But,
Mhm.
oh, your mom, she's got an attitude. And it was really hard for my young brother to understand it because he's only had his nuclear parents his whole life.
Right.
And when I stopped talking to my mom, our dad had just died a year prior. This is the only parent you have left. Okay. And
Mhm.
I've been doing this myself for a long time, but him and I have very different perspectives and we were raised very differently. Do you feel that your sister has a different view of your parents than you do?
No. Nope. It's pretty much the same. I remember growing up because she was younger, the younger sibling, it was always, "You're the older one, you're the more responsible one, you're the one that you have to look out for her." I That's a really did you hear those things too with for your little brother?
We were so far apart. I mean, we're 10 years apart.
Oh, yeah.
So
Me and my sister were like
I moved out of the
3.
house. Yeah, I moved out of the house when I was 17 and he was 7. So I mean, I babysat him when he was little and things
Yeah,
like that, but we were
right.
just so far apart.
Yeah,
It
that makes
was
sense. Yeah, so it was no, we pretty much have the same outlook on our parents and the effect that they both have had on us. And my parents have been married for almost 40 years. I grew up in the same house my whole life. I'm beyond grateful for the parents that I have. Truly, I wasn't physically abused. I think more of the mental stuff and the emotional neglect was just them trying to navigate through parenting like we all
Yeah,
do. There's a couple other things
definitely.
that because I was looking about parenting styles and some things that I have heard. And so I just wanted to bring them up. Low self-esteem that mothers will pass on to their daughters. And I have to say that this has affected me. I think that low self-esteem can come from anything. I mean, society or your friends or whatever. But always hearing I heard my mom a lot be critical of others. Just like watching TV, like, oh, that hair color is awful on her. Like that would just be just her opinion about somebody, but it was just something I
Mhm.
think subconsciously, if you hear that, you insult others so easily and you look at others and you judge them. And also, if you're judging others, you're judging yourself. Uh, so that was something I think I had to get over my low self esteem. I probably didn't start getting over that until like my 30s, just settling for men. And like we've mentioned before, like putting too much stock in, like, I wonder if he would like this on me or something like that. Yeah,
Mhm.
no, I'm not doing that anymore. And a poverty mindset. I did hear a lot growing up. We can't afford that. That costs too much. And now I'm very mindful of that with my kids. I won't ever say that to them. I probably do spend way too much than I should. I should be saving, but give them, try to make up, give them loads of things. But it's if you don't think that you're worth all the abundance the universe has to offer, if you always tell yourself you can't afford it or you're too broke for it, or I think you ingrain that in your kids,
Oh,
and
yeah,
and they
definitely.
grow up and they think, well, I'm not good enough to receive these things, I'm not smart enough to receive these things. And I think that I had to learn that the hard way and start looking at the world from a different perspective than what my parents raised me as.
I agree. I feel like I learned a lot of self-hatred,
Mhm.
especially there was a lot of, like it's weird because my mom was a very, like, powerful like, she was the breadwinner, she was the decision maker, she was the enforcer in our household, but at the same time, there was a lot of, like, anti-feminism, like, it's so she was not, like,
Interesting.
obey your husband. She was not obeying her husband whatsoever, but
Mhm.
anytime there was any mention of something like empowering women, it was always cut down. I was skinny my whole life up until my 20s. I was like a size 0 and then for many years was still very small, and I remember and I would eat whatever I wanted. And always my mom would say, "Oh, you better not eat like that. That's gonna catch up with you. You're gonna be fat like me someday." And here I am. Almost like me and my mom are almost the same size. She's probably one size bigger than me. And that's just genetics and
Yeah.
that's just how metabolisms work when you get older. But that was something like I've never had any kind of food insecurity. I've always been a girl that ate. I've never had an eating disorder. But now that I am bigger, I feel like I am conscious about it all the time, and it's something
Mhm.
that I think about nonstop. And I feel like it's because she always talked about that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I I didn't have more in like, the weight thing was never a thing, but it was always, "This color doesn't look good with my skin. This lipstick doesn't look good on me." You know, that's more so this or she really, she talked about herself more than anything. She hates certain colors on her, or this washes her out, and I would hear her be very critical of herself all the time too, and just hearing your mom's voice, all the time inside
Mhm.
of you, what she says to you. So it's a struggle. I think that when you become aware of it, about how your mom affected you, I think you need to start unpacking things very slowly. It can be really painful, especially like from the extreme like your grandma was, all the way to kind of subtle and quiet, maybe more so like my mom was at times. It's still all very detrimental to your mental and emotional growth and development throughout your adulthood, and then when you start to develop your own emotional and romantic relationships and friendships. Did your mom have close friends and good friendships?
She did a little bit when I was younger and not so much as she got older, but she would not all of her friends, but some of her friends, like, when they weren't around, she would talk bad about them, and so that
Mm,
also kind of
interesting, yeah.
instilled some things in me.
Yeah,
But she really didn't hang out with friends much as we aged, and I don't know if that's just because it's hard when everyone has kids and they're doing
yeah,
different things, but for the most part, it was just us and our family.
yeah, yeah, I was just curious. My mom had a couple close friends, and it was I don't remember her saying anything bad about him or anything, but it was always far and few in between, like, when she saw them, and so I don't know about, like, a couple close friends, but I've had I can compare it to, like, I've had a couple close friends, like, throughout my life, but never, like, a consistent, like, best friend. Like, there's not, like, this best friend from childhood that I still have. Like you said, it was more like a family knit thing, and maybe that's a good thing because there is some people that you should grow out of, but I do think that moms definitely affect our just platonic friendships too. Just
Definitely,
never
and I think
I was just gonna say never the depth of, like, the emotional depth, like getting too close to somebody, it's just
yeah, definitely. I think recognizing, like we've said, especially those things that we consciously try, like, we compare ourselves to our mothers. I
Mhm.
think recognizing those things and moving past them is huge, and really just, giving other people grace, giving our mothers grace, and knowing that we are doing better. We're trying to improve ourselves. We're trying to be better mothers, better friends, better partners. I think that's the most we can do.
Yeah, I think it is. Yep, just forgive them, love them. I don't
And make
know.
sure you have your boundaries set.
Yeah, and make sure yes, definitely make sure you have your boundaries set with them. You're definitely not gonna be able to downward your dog the way through all your trauma. So, start
Nope, nope.
it's just I think journaling helps me more than anything, and if you kinda start to have those hard conversations with your mom or even your other parent, somebody that understands them or your sibling, I think that if you can do that, if you could have a support system within your family and just grow together, I'd unpack all your trauma together. I think that that would be really helpful, but it's very hard to start where to start with those conversations.
Yeah, and you gotta be gentle because egos,
Yes.
get in the way. So you might bring it up and it might get shot down, and maybe you try again later.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that wraps it
Alright.
up for our
I think
conversation
so.
for today. If you do want a journaling prompt, I don't think we did one last time, I don't remember, but for this
No,
one, maybe just I like your approach to this about how you wrote down the good qualities that were ingrained in you from your mom and some of the negative things, maybe the traits that you've held on to. That wasn't the approach I took to it, but I do like that approach. And I think that if you start there, I would definitely start to see some things overlap. So maybe that would be a good thing for our listeners to be able to do is just start to write things down and how those things have affected them in their romantic relationships.
definitely. Thank you all for listening to this episode, and we can't wait to see you next week. Namaste.
Namaste.